Roll for Crit presents How to Play Iconoclash in 5 minutes or less or more. Iconoclash is the fast-paced game of platform fighting action, designed by Quinn Washburn and published by Strange Machine Games. Your goal in Iconoclash is to reduce your opponent's life totals from 25 to 0 before they can do the same to you. The game will take place on a stage made up of a series of spaces in rows and columns. All players begin with a unique deck of cards for their chosen fighter, plus a health tracker and a reference card. In a two-player game, the second player will also start with a power token. When ready, all players draw a hand of 6 cards from their deck, plus their basic card, for a total of 7. The first player gets to place their fighter token first at a respawn point of their choice, followed by the second player, who must choose a different one. On your turn, you'll carry out 3 phases: Upkeep, Combat, and Cleanup. First, during Upkeep, collect 2 movement tokens, which you'll be using to move around the stage. Then, draw a new environment card and resolve it. Most environment cards will instruct you to place an item token somewhere on the map. Some will put stage conditions into play, usually designating certain areas of the stage as positive or negative zones. Entering into one of these zones will have an effect according to the card's instructions. Environment cards remain in play until the start of your next turn. After resolving your environment card, move on to the combat phase, where most of the game's action will occur. During the combat phase, you can move, and you must take 2 actions. You can move before or after an action, but not while one is being resolved. In order to move one space, you must spend one of your movement tokens. You can move your fighter in any direction, orthogonally or diagonally. Fighters can move through each other, but cannot share the same space. There are 3 types of platforms that can appear in a stage: soft, hard, and impassable. Soft platforms can be moved through or onto freely. Hard platforms can hold fighters but cannot be moved through, and impassable platforms cannot be moved through or onto. There are also hazard spaces which apply a point of damage to any fighter who enters them. Some cards will allow you to teleport to a space, in which case you ignore the effects of any spaces in between because you don't technically move into them. On your turn, you can move as many times as you can afford to spend movement tokens, but you don't have to move if you don't want to. You do have to take 2 actions on your turn. Typically, an action will consist of playing one of your attack cards from your hand. Every attack card has a damage value and a launch value. If there is a smaller number next to the damage value, that is the attack's range. That means you need to be between 1 and that number of spaces away from your target in a straight line in order for the attack to hit them successfully. If there is no range number, then that's a melee attack, and that means you need to be directly next to the target to hit them. In either case, you cannot make an attack when diagonal to your target. Also be aware that all platforms block attacks, even soft platforms. After playing your attack, you must also declare which of its abilities you've chosen to take effect. How and when this ability triggers exactly depends on the text of the card, but it could potentially improve your damage output or even earn you some extra tokens. If an ability has an icon at the front of it, that means you need to spend a resource, such as a power token, in order to carry it out. After declaring this ability, but before carrying out the rest of the attack, your opponent has the option to play a shield card from their hand as a reaction. When played, they choose one of the shield card's abilities to take effect, usually resulting in them lessening the attack in some way. If no shield is played, carry out the attack card's effects in full. First, subtract the damage value from the target's health total. Then, launch them in any one direction, orthogonal or diagonal, a number of spaces equal to the attack's launch value. Launching a fighter simply means moving them that number of spaces, or until they hit a blocked or occupied space. A fighter can be launched in any direction, even towards you. If you're able to launch your opponent so that they would exit the stage entirely, they take an additional 2 damage, and then choose an unoccupied respawn space to return to immediately. Remember that you can move in between attacks, but not while one is being resolved. If you aren't able to get within range of another fighter to target them, you can still play an attack card, even if it would have no effect, in order to count as one of your 2 actions for the turn. But another action option is to discard a card in hand in order to receive additional movement points equal to the card's boost value. Doing so means that you won't get to use the card for its normal effect. If you don't have any cards in hand and you still need to take an action, you have to instead draw a card and take 1 point of damage. Doing so also counts as one of your actions. Any attack cards played during your turn are placed into your personal discard pile. After finishing up with your movements and attacks, it's time for the cleanup phase. Any cards with end of turn effects trigger now. If you played your basic card, it returns to your hand from your discard pile. You will always be able to play your basic card once each turn. Next, draw 2 new cards from your deck. If your hand exceeds 8 cards, not including your basic card, discard until you have 8 in hand. and if you have more than 5 movement tokens, discard those as well until you have 5. Then the next player takes their turn, beginning with their Upkeep Phase. Don't forget, there are items in this game. If you move into or occupy a space with an item token during your turn, discard it and draw a card from the item deck to your hand. Items are played just like your other cards, but are discarded to an item discard pile instead of your own. If a card effect says that a drop occurs, this means that all fighters and item boxes drop down spaces on the stage until they hit a platform or fall off the bottom, which would result in an edge-off in the case of a fighter. If a drop causes one or more fighters to share the same space, all fighters there receive 1 point of damage. Then whichever fighter was in that space originally launches all the other fighters in a direction of their choice 1 space. The first time a player needs to draw a card and their deck is empty, they reshuffle it, but if they need to reshuffle a second time, they lose. Otherwise, the winner is the last fighter standing with at least 1 point of health. In conclusion, move, attack, defend, launch. That's Iconoclash in a nutshell. Did you get all that?